First off, you're going to be presented with these windows. Do you want to check for updates? Yeah, sure, why not? Do you want to submit stats? Sure, why not? It doesn't matter. This thing, I don't. You can use it, but the whole point of this stream is that I'm showing you what to do. So just untick it, close that. Okay, so I've got an image here, and I'm just going to bring this in. And as you can see, hopefully there's this better describes the layout of the viewport, and I think it will just help me describe to you what the different parts are. So the first part is this big window in the middle. That's the 3D edit. So that's where you do all your 3D editing, all your clicking, pretty much, where you're navigating the mesh, where you're, I don't know, checking renders, that kind of thing. It's all going in here. Number 2 is the Scene Explorer. So this contains everything in the file that you've opened. So be that an LXO file, which is Modo's native file, it could be an OBJ, it could be an FBX. All the information within that file is in this Explorer window. You can have multiple files open and they'll keep it in different scenes, which is, you can see which one it is because everything's parented to it. It's got this like clipper board icon, so you can quickly identify them. Super handy, and you'll see as we go forward. Underneath that is the properties window. Now there are other tabs in these as well, but we'll get to those later on. So in the properties, this will be the global properties of a mesh or of whatever you have selected. They will appear in here. Where number 4 is, this is your, especially in 3D modeling, your tools. So in this kind of top left area, all the tools that you come across will be on this side, on this column. All the modeling tools are, kept into this window at the top. Number 5 is tool properties. So if you click on a tool, the properties for that tool are displayed down here. Each tool will have different properties, so this will update as you select new stuff. But yeah, it is located down here. This is the default layout, by the way. Number 6 is this kind of shelf at the top, so it goes from auto select right through to work plane. So again, we'll get into this, but this is your component modes, your item modes, your action centers, fall-offs, snap-in, that kind of thing. All buttons and menus up here that can be accessed at any time. Number 7 is Modo's version of its kind of default layouts for if you're doing certain jobs. So there's a modeling one, there's a topology one, UVs, painting, animating, rendering, that kind of thing. And basically all it is it is a new layout. It rearranges the windows to better suit your needs for that particular job you're doing at that time. You can, set your favorites and you can minimize this bar. We'll go through that, but they're up there and they're easily to navigate to. The last one, number 8, is kind of extra plugins. These are kind of installed on my computer, so you might not necessarily have them. I think the Vert toolbox, normal toolbox, is available because that got worked in, I think, in version 901. But the others, I don't think they come as standard, so don't worry about them. We're not going to be looking at them today, but I just wanted to make you aware. Okay, so that's kind of the breakdown. I'll put this image on the Discord. I'll make it available in the PDF, blah, 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 so that you've got it to go on with later on. Okay, so first off, navigation. for me, I use Modo's default controls to navigate. If you want to change the controls to be of another program, it's really easy to do. All you do is go System. Is it System? Oh yes, it is System. System Preferences. System Preferences. Input, which is down here, and then you go remap in. So System Preferences. Scroll down to Input, and then go to remap in. And then at the top here it says Mouse Input Preset, and you can just change this to whatever software you're most comfortable with. Like I said, I use Modo. I'm so used to Modo's normal way of doing things, of navigating, its default way, that I think that's the best, to be honest. As you will discover while we're going through this quick start, a lot of the shortcuts stick around kind of the left side of the keyboard. So this is where the navigation takes place, but you will find that your hand rests over a lot of keys, and that's why I quite like Modo's default setup. Yeah, okay, so we're in. How do I navigate? Super easy. If you want to rotate, you just press Alt and left click. Note how the mouse icon changes to this rotation spinny icon thing. If you want to pan, you hold down Alt and Shift. Again, the cursor changes, and left click to pan. And if you want to zoom in and out, it's Alt and Control and left click, and you zoom in and out with the left clicking. You can also use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out, but I find that Control and just clicking works really well. So for me, I have my left thumb on Alt, I have my little finger on Control, and I have my fourth finger on Shift. It kind of gives you this kind of weird kind of claw, but as you go on, you kind of get used to it. Okay, so the layouts, as we discussed earlier, there's predetermined ones at the top. That's fine. It's really good for if you are looking at doing just retopology, just go into the retopology tab. As you can see, things update to reflect what you're working on. If we go into like the animate tab, we'll get a timeline. If we go to rendering, you'll get a preview browser and a camera view and that kind of thing. It just rejigs the layout and what you can see to be better suited to what you're doing. So for me, I often just go into the topology one if I'm doing topology, or I go into the paint one if I'm working on vertex maps. So like I said before, you can have your favorites only. So you can, if you press this only star button, you can see it toggles on and off. So I'll have modeling as my favorite, topology as a favorite, probably painting as a favorite, game tools as a favorite. That's probably it. And now when I click the button, only my favorite ones are displayed. You can click this plus and create a new layout as well. But yeah, and also if you want to just get rid of this row entirely, you just press on the far left these double arrows and it hides the bar. Now if you want to see the bar again, you just click on the bar, that thin black line at the top. Super easy. I'm going to leave it on for the moment with everything showing just for this tutorial. Okay, so say you want another window open, but you don't want to change layouts, then that's fine. All you do is go Layout, Windows, New Window, and then for me I always click Data List. Now this will bring up just an empty window with a palette in it. So to fill it with whatever you want, you just click on this arrow to the right, and it basically gives you every window every kind of tool or window or palette or thing that you want is in this list. So I find having a separate window open and filling it with a 3D model view and changing this to a camera, now I can have my camera on screen as I'm doing something else. Super handy. Likewise, if we want to change this again, and I maybe want this as the shader tree, then I can do that. It's super flexible. If you want to, it seems a little, yeah, like you have to go through a lot of steps to get the get a new window, as in layout, window, which kind of window, data list, but it makes sense. Like, I'd rather have the adaptability of it than not. What you can also do is, if you have, so we've got all these tabs like on each thing here. Say we want to pull one of these off. It's really easy. All you do is click on the tab that you want to take off, channels for example, and just drag it. And now you can see it's come away. If you want to put it back, it's fine. There's this dot on the left of the window, the palette name. You just click on that and drag it back in. Now, when it does this, it won't remove the window, so you just have to close that. But that's it. You can also set up custom shortcuts that only work in specific tabs. That's a great one. I didn't actually know that binary. Great one. So all it was saying was you can set up custom shortcuts that only work in specific tabs. So if you want to only use a certain combination of keys to find what you're looking for in the Scene Explorer, those tools aren't going to work or those shortcuts aren't going to work in the 3D view. So that's quite a handy tip actually. Okay, so let's change the layout. So for me, I spend most of my time in the modeling layout, but I don't really like modeling in just one viewport. So in order to, or rather to full screen something, you press 0 on the number pad of your keypad, and that splits it. So for me, I quite like having 3 orthographic viewports and a 3D viewport. This is just the way I like to do things. I find that by doing things in orthographic really helps with the precise nature of what you're doing. I think personally I recommend it. Having said that, I don't like using orthographic viewports in other programs like Maya. It's something, I suppose, weird about me and how I do things, but in Modo I think it really helps, and it doesn't feel like that cluttered or anything. What's nice is that if you move these orthographics, if you zoom in and out, they correspond to each other. Now there is an option to turn that off. Unfortunately, I can't remember it, so you might have to look at the support documents for that. Okay, so one big thing before we get going is there's a shortcut that that was way back in version, I think 601, 701, something like that I got used to, and it was a modeling shortcut for a pie menu. Now in 801, I think they changed it. So the combination I'm talking about is Control Tab. Now when you bring that up, it allows you to tab between the different layouts that Modo gives you by default. Now, personally, I think that's like horrible. For me, I'd gone from a pie menu for modeling to why on earth would I want to change, to a different layout while I was in modeling. Surely, for me anyway, if I'm in modeling, I'm staying in modeling. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reassign what's on this shortcut, just because it really frustrates me when I'm modeling and I press this and it switches my layout. I'm so used to the old way that I can't handle the new way. So if you want to change any of the shortcuts, it's really easy. You go System, Input, Editor, and then this lists all of the predefined default shortcuts that comes with Modo. So for me, I want to change Control Tab. So all I do is click on Control, and then I scroll down until I see Tab, which is down here. And as you can see, it says switch between layouts via recent list or list of favorites. Yeah, great. I mean, handy really if you want it to do that. I don't. So you can change this really easily. So what you do is you double click, and that gives you the option to put a new command in. Now for me, I've got this saved out, this line of command, which I will paste in the chats for you. All it is a form, a new form, a pie window of a certain kind, which I'll demo in a minute when I press OK. So when you've got your script in for this, press OK, and you can see it's updated it to the form I want, and now it says open from modeling as a pie menu. Perfect. You don't have to do save changes or anything like that. It updates automatically. So now if I press Control Tab, this lovely pie menu comes up, and I use this quite frequently. Granted, I only use a couple of things on it, but I've got the memory of it kind of in my fingers, the muscle memory. The reason I don't use everything in here is because all the shortcuts, well, for a lot of the things in this menu, are situated for where your left hand is on the keyboard. Yeah, okay. So that's basically me. That's like the one thing I change to make Modo more appealing to me, more usable to me. Admittedly, like that might not be helpful to a lot of people, but for me, the way I work, that's super handy. Okay, so next we're going to look at the Scene Explorer. So this contains, like I said before, everything that is currently open in the file. So the file will be this top one in bold with the clipboard next to it, and it'll be called whenever the file's called. Like I said before, you can have multiple files or multiple scenes open, and you just click on the one that you want to be visible. So let's create a new scene. Let's put a square in here, sorry, a cube in here and a cylinder in here. Okay, so I've got a cylinder in one and I've got a cube in the other, and you can see it's quite easy. You just click on the other scene to access it. If we want this cylinder in this other scene, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can either drag it in, and it gives you this option. Do you want to import the children shaders, remove source items? Generally for me, children and shaders, okay, comes in and it's done. You can also, if you want, you can select it, press Ctrl+C, copy, and paste it in. Again, super easy. Now I'm going to go through some selection stuff in a bit, but for now, it's really easy to move from one to the other. Okay, so that's kind of opening multiple scenes, moving one from to moving assets or geometries between scenes. You can obviously import stuff into, like if you've got an OBJ open and you want to import another one into it, then just go File, Import, really straightforward. Yeah, simple stuff. If you want to add new scene items to this file, then all you have to do is at the top of this this Scene Explorer, it says Add Item in text, and then next to it there's an arrow down. Now, Add Item brings up the preset browser. More on this later. I never use this because, as you can see, there's quite a lot going on already. And I'm also used to older versions of it, of Modo. Instead, if you click on this arrow to the right of the text, it will give you a list of everything that you can add, which is excellent. So all you do is you click on that arrow and then you click on the thing that you want. So I want a new camera, done. Maybe I want a new mesh, done. What if I want a new light? Then we go down to lights and we add a new light. It's really, really easy. As you can see, things are populated in the menu as we do that. To move things around in this hierarchy, all you do is left click, drag and drop, and that moves it to the wherever you want in the stack. Generally, it doesn't matter where things are in the stack, but for some tools it is important. So I think if you want to boolean something, then the driver has to be on top, something like that. I mean, I never use them, but there is some kind of weird setting where it has to be hierarchical. If you want to make things stand out in the Scene Explorer, then you can right click on whatever. Let's right click on this light, and you can go edit to color and then change the color to, let's say, red. And now it's highlighted as red. And obviously you can have multiple colors. Yeah, super handy for, you know, just kind of organizing your scene a bit more. If you want to rename a mesh, click on it again, and then type whatever you want. It's a bit weird at first, but you'll get used to it. You just have to, I think if you double click, nothing happens, but if you click and then click again, it gives you the option. There's got to be like a millisecond pause or something for it to go, yes, he wants to rename. If you want to group items, again, super easy. You just select the items that you want to group and you press Ctrl G, and that groups them into a little group like this. And then again, you can do what you want. You can rename it, whatever. If you want to select multiple items, then you can hold down Shift and left click. If you want to remove items, then you just press Control and left click, and it keeps your selection. Peachy. Okay, another good thing is if you want to if you've got a massive scene, or you've got loads of items in your scene and you can't find anything, then at the top of the Scene Explorer there's this F. Now if you press that, it's going to open this search bar. Now it's great because you can start typing and it will display the name, whatever you're writing, and anything that's named that, it will come up. So it's just filtering that information. And what's great about this is that this search bar can be activated in most things. Super handy. If you want to change the visibility of things, then you just click on this eye. You can select multiple things at once and click them. Super easy. Actually, a word on that search. If you leave it highlighted, then you're not going to see the whole scene. Yeah, so toggle the eyes, and it does it globally. One thing that will be handy at this stage now as well is to focus in on whatever you've got selected. You press Shift A, and that focuses in. It's not F. F flips polygons. Now that's kind of, again, these are Modo's default things. This is what I'm used to. You're going to be used to different ways of working. Shift A to focus in on something. F is something else. Yeah. So that's kind of, yeah, that's that. If you want to quickly add a new mesh item, so basically a mesh item, just going to get rid of this scene. So basically when you're modelling, you can add different parts of a model, different pieces of geometry to different mesh layers. You don't have to have everything all on one. Now this is really handy because it means that you can, if you've finished doing one bit or you're checking your scale against something, then you can put it on a mesh layer. So for example, if I put a cube on this top layer and I put a cylinder on this other layer, if I'm modelling this, I can't select any of the vertices, say, on this background mesh. I can only select vertices on this on the mesh we have selected. This is super useful when you're modelling because you can you know, leave things untouched while you're working on something else. Now, in things like Maya, you have all your meshes separate. Now that's fine, but when I've model stuff and I'm selecting vertices or edges on one thing, and I misclick, it selects the other mesh. Now I don't know why that's a thing, but this way it means that you're only working on what you have selected. Yeah, it's really simple, but it helps so much to be able to separate things out like this. While we're here, it'll be good to just mention viewport options. So as default, the active mesh is well, in orthographic everything remains wireframe. I quite like that. Inactive meshes are black, so you can see what you're working on and what you're not. In the perspective view, I like everything being the same viewport render. So to change that, you go over to this cog wheel and you go down to inactive meshes, and there's a button at the top that says make inactive mesh same as active, and you just click that and it matches. Obviously you can change this in whichever viewport you're in. I quite like this one. If you want to change the rendering in the viewport window, then just go on this middle button to the right of the viewport that says default. You click on that and you can change this to whatever you want. So there's some really interesting ones like reflection. So this kind of makes it all nice and reflective, really good for seeing how smooth things are and that kind of thing. There's some weird ones, well, cell shading for example, it's kind of weird. Default's pretty standard. Shaded, wireframe, solid, yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory, as you expect in kind of other programs. You can also render on the fly in here by pressing Radial and put it on fast, and you can see we're now getting a visual representation of the lighting in the scene, and we can do this on the fly, and it's literally updating as we're moving things. For me, I don't personally use this mode. I could see how it might be quite good for maybe if you're doing concepting or something like that. You can see the lighting. If we update the light now, it updates as well. But yeah, I hardly ever use this. I'd be wary of using it just because your computer's going to slow down. It's going to be more likely to crash. And we all know we love / hate crashes. So yeah, just be wary of that. There's some other kind of useful things in here which are always quite good to have. You'll have to kind of work through this on your own, that's fine. You can have certain things on and off, show cameras, show lights. Obviously if you show lights then the lighting information is picked up. Show locators, blah blah blah. Super easy, super quick and easy to turn stuff on and off. You can change your wireframe color in here and how much you see of it. I quite like the default. Yeah, it's everything you could want is in there, which is excellent. Okay, so the shortcut for creating a new mesh layer, an empty one, is just N on the keyboard. Just press it and you get as many as you could possibly want. For me, whenever I start a scene, I always just hammer N like 5 times, just because I like having the option of just cutting something, quickly pasting it on another mesh layer and going back to what I was working on. Yeah, that's super handy. Obviously lights, cameras, locators are really really good, I find. So all it is a null, it's just called a locator. Yeah, super easy to use. Sometimes I do like primitive what you call it, primitive rigging with nulls. So I parent geometry to it, mesh layers to it, and then rotate from there, that kind of thing. A good one for modeling is something called a backdrop item. So if we click that, now nothing is displayed at the moment because there isn't an image in it. So let's get an image in just to demonstrate this point. All you do is you click on where it says image and properties, and then where it says add clip, you go load image. And then let's just find some kind of default image, download, and here we've got a picture of the bear in the scene, which is great. You can move this to wherever you want, which is great, but what I would say is if you want to have this in a certain viewport, so say we want this to come up in our right viewport, you change it in here, you change the projection type from front to the right, and now it comes up in there. So kind of super kind of like you could load in an image, but then you'd have to UV something to put it onto, whereas backdrop item, you literally just specify the image you want, change the direction to where you want it to go to, and it works, it just works. Obviously you can scale this up, you can rotate it, you can do whatever you want with it. Super easy. So let's delete both of them. Ooh. Okay, so while we're clicking around on different meshes, it's handy now to talk about the different modes that kind of Modo relies on. So basically, there's two different modes. There's item mode and there's component mode. Both do different things, and it's a bit weird when you first start out, but if you stick with it, it makes a lot of sense. So basically, item mode adjusts the global properties of a mesh. So if you transform an item in a mesh in item mode, then those transformations are going to go with the mesh when you export it. If you import that mesh into another program, it's going to inherit the transformations you inputted in item mode. So for example, if we move this now out here, we rotate it into this weird degree and we scale it, you can see that the properties for this mesh have been updated in here. Now, if we zero all these out, it's going to snap back to how it was before. If we export this and import it into another scene, it's going to bring these changes with it. Yeah, it might be handy for you. I tend to not adjust these, mainly because in a workflow, in a pipeline, if someone models everything at 0, 0, 0 and somebody else models something off in space somewhere, you're not getting a consistency between your assets, which will mean that when they get imported into other packages or game engines, that kind of thing, it's going to be a bit of a nightmare to kind of have a workflow that works really well for one, but then has to accommodate this other one. So just be mindful of it. You can tell if you're in item mode because there's a little cross that appears in the Scene Explorer that shows you that you're in item mode. When you're in item mode, you select items. So we can select these two, we can select this locator, that kind of thing. Yeah, you can't edit polygons or that kind of thing. So in order to actually edit the geometry of something, we need to go into component mode. And being in component mode, this allows you to manipulate vertices, edges, polygons, that kind of thing, where the actual core of the modeling starts off. Yeah, so to get into item mode, we can do multiple things. We can either click on this cross, and that will change it to these 4 squares. That means that we're in item mode. What else we can do is, if we're in item mode here, you can see it's displayed here. You just click on any of these and it changes to edit mode. Alternatively, you can press 1, 2 or 3 to enter component mode as well. So 1 being vertices, 2 being edges, 3 being polygons. 5 is item mode. So for me, Binary Latin pointed out earlier, you can control middle click to select another mesh layer in item mode, in wireframe to select that one. You can press 5 and select, that's fine as well. Or you can just select it in here. Yeah, there's multiple ways of doing it. When you're more used to using Modo, switching modes, it's second nature. You won't know you're doing it, but it's very useful, very helpful to know this at this stage. Things will get a lot more clearer. So now what we could say is, let's just duplicate this mesh. All I did for that was Control D, and let's just zero out these changes. That should all be 100%. Okay. So now, if I input in mesh edit mode, if I move this to kind of match it to how it looks in there, you can see, I mean, it's not bang on, but we're roughly there, something like that. Notice that none of the actual properties on the mesh have changed. They're all 0, 0, 0, scaling 100%. So when we export this, the center of the object is going to come out as with the root of the object being at 0, 0, 0, whereas this other one is going to be offset in space somewhere. What's lovely, I mean, for me, my favorite color is orange. All the highlighting and stuff is orange, love it. But it makes it very easy to see what's selected and what isn't selected, in my opinion. Like I said before, you can change your selection type by pressing the numerical 1, 2 or 3. Obviously each one is a different thing. You can also click them, that's fine too. Super easy. For keys 1 to 7, they're all something different. So 1, 2 and 3 is vertices, edges, polygons. 4 is select by material, we'll get into this later, super handy. 5 is item mode, and then 6 and 7 is pivot and center. So they allow you to change the pivot of an item. I don't really use them because I model everything to 0, 0, 0, just knowing that that will work in my pipeline. You can see what mode you're in by checking this, if the cross is there or the 4 squares are there. Also, by just what you're able to select, that will be the biggest indicator of what mode you're in. The majority of your time will be in component mode, but it's good to be aware of item mode because, you know, it's a new program. It's good to know these things going in. You might be transforming everything in item mode, only to realize that that's not an edit as such. Some items like cameras, directional light, any lights, cameras and locators can only be operated in item mode. This is so that, for example, for all of those examples, lights, cameras, locators, they're working on the real world measurements. So that way, for example, with cameras, you can set the correct field of view to what you would have in a camera that you can hold, that kind of thing. You can also have multiple objects selected and transform them. That's fine, and you can be in either mode for this, and it still works like so. So that's super handy. But what you can't do is you can't have one selected mesh in component mode and another selected mesh in item mode. You have to be both meshes have to be in the same mode. So that's something to be aware of. Basically, we're looking at what we're going through now kind of feel like might not make a lot of sense when we're looking at it in this way, but as we progress, you'll see how it will work itself out. It's kind of weird. When I was writing the notes for this, it was kind of hard to describe the modes, like when you stop and think about it, but when you're working on it and you're using it every day, you forget about it. You forget that it's a thing. Okay, so basically, as I said before, there's three selection types: vertices, edges, polygons, 1, 2, or 3. And all you do to select them is you left click, hold down, drag out. You can also use right click. There's a lasso, you can use that. So I find that the lasso is super handy. I do a lot of selecting with the lasso, and then you kind of fill in the gaps with holding down left click. Super easy. If you want to turn a selection into another selection, so say I want to turn this polygon selection into vertices, all you do is you hold down Alt, and you'll notice that in the top left, these buttons that did say vertices, edges, and polygons change to convert and then the relevant one. So you can hold down Alt and click on one of these, and it changes your selection to that other selection type. And you can do this, infinite number of times. Doesn't really matter. What you can also do is press Alt, and you can press 1, 2, or 3, and that changes as well, changes the selection. So I use Alt 1, 2, or 3 quite frequently. Super easy. My hand's already there for navigation. It's great. You can modify your selections, so it's left click to select. You can add to the selection by holding down Shift and left clicking, and you can minus from a selection by holding Control and left clicking. Super handy. If you want to grow the selection, then you hold down Shift and press the up arrow. If you want to shrink the selection, you press Shift and press the down arrow. Sorry, you hold Shift and press the down arrow, up and down. If you want to invert the selection, then you press left square bracket. Great, invert it back. And if you want to select everything, you press the right square bracket. Super easy. If you want to select a loop, then you just select 2 adjacent polygons or vertices or edges in the direction you want it to loop and press L. Now on this one you can see that it's taken the caps into consideration. Yeah. If you want to select multiple rings at the same time, loops, you just select 2 in that direction, 2 in this, well, as many as you want really, it doesn't matter, but you select them all in the direction you want and press L, and then you've got all the rings that you wanted. Say I want to just get rid of, I don't want the selection in the middle, then I would use something like the lasso tool or Control left click to get rid of it. So Control left click, we can just drag that across in wireframe, it gets rid of it. On this one down here, I can use the hold down Control and use right click lasso to get rid of it. Now if I was to do that in the 3D viewport, then I can press Control and I can drag out to deselect things. Now it's not going to deselect things on the other side, and that's kind of one thing to be aware of as well. In things like Maya, you can select things on the other side of the mesh that you can't see. For me, that's really unhelpful. I like to be able to control where I'm selecting to a point in 3D. So by deselecting or selecting stuff that I can't see. So we can see it on the other side of the mesh here, but it's not directly facing me, so therefore I can't select it. Whereas in wireframe, you're looking all the way through an object, so it's very easy to take things off. Yutagi was asking then was, can you loop in vertically and horizontally at the same time? Answer, yes, and it does it with no problem as well. So all you do is you select the direction of the horizontal, the direction of the vertical, and press L, and it loops it. Like I said before with the focusing on a selection, Shift A to do that, not F. Now F will, if we press it, will flip the polygons. You can see here that the normals are now flipped. If we go inside this mesh, you can see that, oh god, here is our flipped geometry. What's great sometimes about this is that if you have flipped polygons, it's super easy to fix. All you do is you select the polygons that have been flipped, normally by going inside the object, which can be a bit of a faff, but because I can't select anything I can't see, it means it's easy for you to then go in, select all the geometry which is flipped, flip it back, just with F. Really easy. There's one thing that I don't know what the shortcut is for it, but it turns on this mode called lazy selection. You can get to it by going select right down at the bottom here, lazy selection. Now basically what it means is it's highlighting what you're going to be selecting, but it also means that you can't drop whatever the selection is. Now for me, I personally hate this mode because I like to be able to go and deselect things and select things again. In this mode, you have to have something selected. So as you can see down the side of this column, I'm trying to deselect by left clicking in empty space. All it's doing is selecting geometry, even though my mouse cursor is nowhere near that. If that happens, like I said, I don't know what the shortcut for is, but it's in this left region of the keyboard somewhere. If that comes up and you don't want it, to get rid of it, you just go select, untick lazy selection. And now we can select geometry and left click in it, empty space to deselect it. Yeah, that's kind of selections 101, I suppose, in a very, very tight nutshell there. What we're going to move on to is action centers. So this is what Modo uses to determine where the action of a tool originates. Now, that sounds quite long-winded, and to be honest, I had to actually look in the support documentation for a definitive answer on that. But as you begin to use the tools, you're discovering stuff for yourself, it becomes second nature. So basically, an action center, let's just move these off somewhere else for the moment. Okay, so we want to move these meshes and we want to move them in, certain directions. Okay, so by default, your action center is none, which sounds a little weird, but it's kind of one of the best ones. So if you click on the action center button here, it says none at the top. That's the mode we're in. Nothing is displayed saying we're in that mode, but that's it. Now, automatic none is fine. It's great for moving, transforming stuff quickly and easily. What's great about this mode is that this action center is that you can place the cursor wherever you want before you move it, or we just click in space and just start moving. It doesn't matter. Now this is great for when you're modeling detail in somewhere. You can zoom into that area, get real close, and then depending on your selection, the automatic none is going to go to the center of that selection. But say that, so for me, say I want to see the global, a bigger impact of this, I can zoom in another orthographic, or whatever, and just put, you know, I can put the cursor wherever I want and move it from there, and it's gonna, you know, make life a lot easier. By being able to move the cursor to wherever you want, just opens up, you know, how close you have to be or how far away you have to be. Or what I find in Maya is that if I want to change something only slightly, I have to be zoomed out enough to see the transformation tool and move it, instead of, you know, just being able to click off in space and moving it from there. So I'll go through the shortcuts in a minute, but none automatic is, you know, standard default one. Automatic, similar kind of thing, gives you a little crosshair thing, and I think when you start moving it, you can see how far you've moved it from your original placement of the I suppose tool. So good if you want to, you know, check distances, but I never use this mode. I always go back to none, just because generally I don't care where the original cursor came from, where the original position was. I'm not going to go through all of these, but my kind of most used ones are selection. So based on your selection, these will, so for an example, just on here, it will move down the axes of that selection. Super handy. So this time the cursor is, the tool is snapped to them, to selection. And that's going to happen in some cases. Again, as you get used to the tools, you'll know which ones you can move, which ones you can't. That's fine. Another good one is local. Works in a similar way to selection, but it's local to that selection. So local moves it along, I think it moves it along the normal as opposed to the selection. So that's a good one. Element is quite good, but if I'm honest, I hardly ever use it just because I rely on local and selection quite a lot. But element's quite good because you have the ability to change where the cursor originates from, and you can do it based on the normal, an edge or a vertex from something else on the mesh. So element is really handy as well if you want to get something just moving along, maybe perhaps not the normal of the selection, but another normal surface on the shape, on the mesh. And then last but not least is origin, and this just puts it back to the origin. And again, you can no, you're locked in, but yeah, when it's at the origin, it's literally you're moving it from the origin, and every time you then kind of reselect a tool, it snaps back to the origin. So that's really handy when you're mirroring stuff and you want to get it so that all the vertices are at the origin. Okay, so all these action centers are shortcutted, which makes it super handy for selecting them in a flash. You can see actually on each viewport it tells you which action center you're currently in. So Alt A will give you none. Well, it toggles between automatic and none. So I normally toggle it off and then I'm in none. Alt S, selection mode. Alt X, local. Is it Alt E? Nah, it's not Alt E. Piss, don't know what element is. We'll find out in a minute. And Alt W is origin. So again, they're all, for me, my thumb's always on Alt for navigation, so Alt and then just a finger press away for an action center, super handy. What you can also do is you can press Alt Spacebar, and that gives you this quick access menu, and then you just select it from here, and away you go. In a similar kind of vein, we've got Falloffs. So Falloffs are basically, it's a tool that allows you to gradually decrease the intensity across a defined selection. So, for example, if I select these vertices at the top of this cylinder and I want to move them, but I want the fall off to be quite smooth, I go fall off, soft selection. Now nothing happens, and this is because a tool isn't activated. More of that in a moment, but you can see the text on each viewport has come up as soft selection fall off, so we know it's been activated. So to activate it and to see the results of it, you just click on a tool. So in this case we're going to use translate W, and now you can see the fall off is active. So everything in orange is our selection, and then it bleeds out to like this brown colour, and that's the fall off. You can adjust the fall off by right clicking and dragging, and that brings out this kind of visual indicator of how that fall off is affecting the rest of the mesh. And then once we've got something that we're happy with, you just move it, and you can see we get a nice fall off to this movement, to this translation effect we've applied. To get rid of the fall off, well, to kind of commit these changes, you press spacebar to drop the tool, more on that later, and then to get rid of the fall off, you just go up to the top again and press none, and there you go, you're left with the original selection. So in all honesty, I don't really use, I think the most common ones I use are linear and soft selection. So linear is quite a straightforward one. Basically when it's selected, you click and drag 2 pointers out, and in the same way that you can see the visually see the fall off, you can see which parts of the mesh are going to be more affected. So the wider end of the triangle is going to be more affected, and the point at the other end is going to be less effective. You can reverse these. So as I said before, these properties, tool properties, update depending on what tool you've got selected. You can press reverse in here to flip the direction. If you've misplaced these, then you can use just the small arrows to move them about in 3D space. You can adjust these on the fly. So say we've got say this is what we want, and we now translate it, you can see that the mesh is scaling depending on which end is nearest the greater end, and because the tool is still active, we can, you know, move this up and down to influence the mesh as we're transforming it. So super handy if you're kind of going, right, well, I want to move it over here, but I'm not sure how much by. Then you kind of just do a default one and then activate the tool and then just use the guide to change what you're doing interactively. Again, once you're done, you press spacebar to drop the tool, and that's now cooked in as such. To get rid of the fall off, you just go up to the top and click none. For me, like I said, I only really use linear and soft selection. They seem to do most of them. Okay, so modelling tools. As you can see, there's this corner, this upper left area that hosts whatever our modelling tools. There's lots of different tabs. We will be going through all of them. If you're in, say, another layout view, so say we're in Paint, for example, we can't see our modelling tools anymore. But it's super easy. You either just click on this model button at the top, or you press F2, and that brings up all the tools again. It also brings up the tool properties with it, which is super handy. So regardless of what mode you're in, if you press F2, you'll always get the modelling tools. I'm going to go back to the model layout. The reason why it's split into, well, this might not be the reason, but it's the reason I think is why they've done it, is they split it into these different tabs so that it's easier to find things. If you're doing stuff with vertices, then you're most likely going to be using Op Tools in the Vertex tab. If you're using curves, you're probably going to be have the Curve tab open. It stops you from faffing about in menus or remembering where a certain tool is in a certain menu. Maya, I'm looking at you. It's super handy, and a lot of tools are shortcutted as well, but at least you know that in here you get a visual indicator of what the tool does. Also you get, they're named appropriately. And I think if you just hover on it, it just tells you, a bit about it and if there's like a different mode for it. Yeah, so the best way to think about tools in Modo, and this is quite an important one, a bit like kind of in the same vein of importance with item mode and component node. So the best way to think about tools is they're active until you let go of them. So a real world example of this is, say you want to hit a nail into a wall. So in order to do that, you need a hammer. So you pick the hammer up, you use the hammer to hit the nail into the wall, and then you put the hammer down because you're no longer using it. It's the same principle in Modo. If you want to use a certain tool, you select it, or do the shortcut for it, you pick it up, you do the modifications that you want with the tool, and then when you're done with the tool, you drop it. So you can either drop a tool by deselecting it from where you got it from, or you press the spacebar. In fact, I've just remembered another selection type, which is by far the most common selection thing you'll use, and I cannot believe I forgot about it. But if you want to quickly select between vertices, edges, and polygons, press the spacebar. I'm just going to get a selection in each one so you can see visually if we come in here. So now if I cycle spacebar, we're literally cycling between which mode you're in and what you last selected in that mode. So when you kind of work alongside Modo users, they're pressing, all you can hear sometimes is the spacebar going, and that's just somebody like cycling between selections and then continuing. I cannot believe I forgot about that. So spacebar is probably the most frequently used button in Modo, I would say. And likewise with the back to the tools thing, to drop the tool, you just press the spacebar. One thing to be aware of, again, with these tools is that once you drop it, whatever edits you have made are then kind of cooked in. If you undo that change with Control Z, you'll undo the entire tool. Okay? So, for example, I've got this mesh here. It's the only one selected. Like I said, I'm going to go through these tools with you in a moment. But let me just activate a tool just to show you. Okay, so I've got this radial sweep, and let's just give it. So you can see that I'm adjusting the properties in the left here. I can adjust these dynamically. I can move the cursor about to change, how they're kind of being swept apart, that kind of thing. I can change the start and the end angle for this, so maybe we want it only going halfway. So these tools are so intuitive, they're a godsend. And again, we can adjust maybe like the slant of this, whatever we want. So say, there we go, say we've got this and we're like, okay, I'm done with the tool, I'm going to drop it. So all I'm going to do is we're going to press spacebar and that drops the tool. Now say if I go, oh right, well this is great, but actually I want it with, I want it to go to 360 again, I don't want it to go to 180. If we press undo, it does the entire tool, okay? So to get that back, all we do is click on radial array again and press apply tool. And that locks that back in. Now, annoyingly about this, and this could be fixed in the new version of Modo, who knows, but when we press apply tool, it applies those settings again, but locks us out from manipulating it with the handles. So if we undo that and go again, radial array, and if we click apply, yeah, the same thing happens. So annoyingly, you won't ever get, what you had before perfectly, unless you noted down the exact coordinates of this handle when you were doing it, so i.e. these. But it does mean that you can, we can adapt this now to be all the way around. We can change it again if we want. We can increase the count, blah, blah, blah. So it's just something to be aware of when you're using these tools. Again, like I know I keep saying this, but as you get used to using Modo and used to using tools, this will become second nature. And let me just say, it doesn't feel like you're losing work at all, like not in the slightest. If anything, using the tools in this way kind of opens you up to new ideas that you didn't really see before, which is great. Happy accidents, as they were. Yeah, so that's just something to be aware of. I think a few of you are going to find that frustrating at first, but just stick with it. It makes sense. So a bit like in that demo just then, if we now do that to this cube, so we want that exact pattern, but just with this cube instead. When we click on the tool, it still has the last settings inside it. So when we apply it, we get exactly the same pattern in exactly the same angle with the exact number of meshes. So I really like this. I like that it retains information from tool to tool. It just means that if you're, say, adding multiple edge loops or something like that in across a mesh, and you want them all to be the same distance apart, then it's great. You just keep loop selecting things and using that tool. So while we're here, and in fact being on this tab, we'll demonstrate this quite often. So like I said, if there's like a small arrow in the bottom right of any of the buttons, then that means that there's extra options available. So if you click and hold, you'll get another window appear with whatever options are available for that tool. You can also see some of these by holding down Shift, Alt or Control. By holding down Alt here, you can see that all of these change to instance. Okay, so let's move on to hiding and such. So to hide an object, a mesh, you just select what you want and press H to hide it. If we want to unhide it, then you press U. Unhide unhides everything. So for example, in my first pass I might hide these two, and then I might go, oh actually I might hide these as well and hide these guys. That's fine, but then if I press U, it brings them all back, so just something to be aware of. You can also hide everything apart from the selection, and in that case you press Shift H and that hides everything else. Again, U to get it back. If you want to delete something, so this depends on kind of what so obviously you can delete. So if, say, we want to delete this mesh, then we just press delete, the del key on that group of 6, that island of 6. If you press backspace, you'll won't be able to see anything in the 3D view, but as you can see in the orthographics, it leaves the vertices behind. So be careful of that. For full-blown deletes, it's the del key. For leaving stuff behind, it's backspace. So for example, in here, if I want to delete this edge, if I press delete, that didn't do what I thought it was going to do. What I thought it was going to do was it was just going to blow away all the polygons. It turns out it doesn't matter. So for me, I'm used to using backspace because it gets rid of the vertices. Yeah, that for me, that's just the way I learnt it, so that's how I differentiate them. Like in other programs like Word and stuff like that, you can cut, copy and paste, no problem at all. So for this, for example, we can cut this, we can select another mesh layer and we can paste it in. We can copy this, put it in another mesh layer, paste it in. And there we go, we've got a copy. If you're copying parts of a mesh, so for example these polygons, be careful. So say I want to copy these and then paste them. Now I've pasted them over my original selection. Now the problem with this is that when I come to move this, oh my god, it actually worked? No. Well, they fixed that. Who knew? In version 2.3, that wasn't an option. Okay, what happened before was that if you copied something and pasted it onto itself, it would select it would kind of select the original selection and then move that. So this disk would still be attached to the original mesh, which is really weird. But it seems like they fixed it, which is, you know, fantastic. Copy and paste, and you move it away and it's not attached. Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, haven't really got anything else to say on that. That worked an absolute treat. Oh, excellent. Right. Well, I don't have to talk about that now, but yeah, so all you do is copy, paste, and move it away, and it's done. Be wary though, if you copy and paste it and then lose your selection, then you're trying to get that back is going to be a bit of a faff. As you can see here, I know it's not super obviously clear, but again, you'll get used to it when you're using it, but the wireframe is slightly darker in places. Now that's because something is pasted in the exact location of the original selection that you copied. You can check this by if you select, or try and select these polygons. You see this flickering? It's flickering between the two polygons over each other. So it makes them a bit difficult to select sometimes. So, there's that. But also on your verts and on your edges, you're going to get two edges, you're going to get two verts. So to just be aware of that. It's easily solved. Like I said, we'll go into that when we go to tools, but yeah, just watch out for it. Okay, so we've got our, we've done copy and paste. Something that a lot of programs have is subdividing, like a preview. So in Maya, I think it's 1, 2, and 3 different levels of subdivision. In Modo, it's just tab. You tab on, you tab off. It toggles. So you can quickly and easily preview what the mesh looks like when it's all smoothed out. Now, remember that if it's left in this state, if it's left with tab on, with the preview on, it will still export in the unpreviewed version. So to make sure that it stays in this version, you have to freeze the geometry, and to do that you press Shift D, and that gives us this subdivide polygons thing, and you can, from the method, you choose which one you want. So we want smooth, and you press OK. Let's have a look. Let's do D. Yeah. So it's just gonna. I think it quadruples the mesh. And that's what gives you more subdivisions and more smoothing. I think what you can also do is you go geometry, freeze, faces perhaps. There you go. So actually it's, you have to go geometry, freeze faces to cook in the preview stuff. It's not Shift D. Preview in menu. Just making a note of that myself. And obviously once the information is cooked in, you have to undo it in order to you know, see the original form. For me, toggling this quite often helps identify any kinks or anything like that, where perhaps things are too close together, or there's weird pinching, or for example if we just move these out. So that's the base form, looks awful. That's not a good mesh in any shape or form. We've got kind of polygons flipping out all over the place, but it gives you this really smooth, nice looking shape. So that's just something to be aware of. So if we delete this polygon now, in preview mode we're left with a circle. Obviously it's just the polygon's gone. If you get this, then it's a quick solution to fill it again. All you do is select all the edges and press P, and that puts a new polygon in. If you have multiple, you know, we've got all this deleted and we subdivide it, you can press P to fill it. Now this is going to give you weird stretching and stuff, but essentially Modo doesn't care how many points make up this polygon. It will fill it no matter what, and then it's up to you to kind of subdivide it again, or kind of link up these so they make a bit more sense. And I think you can kind of see we're getting some pinching in the mesh in the preview. Let's see if I can make that any. There you go. You can see in the preview there, it's pinching real bad because this is, how many verts has this got? 18 verts now. So it's trying its best to preview the mesh, but without having to subdivide it. Without having you to kind of put the edge loops in to make it work better. Yeah, okay, so that's that. Okay, so that's kind of a very fast run through of those, you know, kind of the Scene Explorer, brief look at properties, selection types, item mode, component mode, selection types, action centers, fall-offs, hiding, deleting, converting selection types, how the tools should be interpreted, that kind of thing. I'm now going to go quickly through in this kind of last hour kind of my most common tools and just demo them to you. Personally, I probably don't use half the tools in Modo, just because I can get away with what I most use to create what I want. Everyone's different, but hopefully this will kind of give you an overview as to kind of the most common ones. So yeah, I'm going to close this scene. So just to do that was Control W and then backspace to not save it. I'm going to add a couple of mesh layers just with N, and then I'm just going to get a primitive in for the moment. Okay, so first off, basic in the modeling tools up here. Basic, I guess, is just kind of your starting tools, really. You've got all your primitives, you've got all your transformations, you've got snapping, and you've got, you know, some shortcutted stuff early on to some of the tools like bridging, beveling, that kind of thing. So primitives, same as every other package. When you click on one, so in fact, let me just delete this one. When we click on one, so it's now highlighted, and you can see that the tool properties have updated. You can see its position is 0, size is 1 meter, segments 1 meter. So this is fine. What you can do is you can change these. So let's have it 5 meters by 4 by 3 meters, and segments, let's have it 5 by 4 by 3. And let's offset it by 5 by 4 by 3. Okay, and we click Apply Tool. And now we have a 5 meter by 4 meter by 3 meter cube, and with 5, 4, and 3 subdivisions. Okay, so that's, you know, that can be a way of getting, you know, a primitive out. Again, let me just move this to one side, and if I activate that tool again, it's retained those options, and we can click Apply Tool, and the same one will come in that same position. If I want to add a primitive to another mesh layer, you hold down Shift, you see all these icons change to this plus button, and you click. And it just brings in a default cube 1 by 1 by 1 meter on a new mesh layer. What you can also do, and this is my preferred method, is if you hold down Control, you can see the icons have changed to being this like graph measurement thing. You just click this and it gives you a default cube 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter at 0, 0, 0 on the mesh layer that I'm currently on. I think this is for me anyway, for some of these, Control clicking is the easiest way, fastest way to get what you want. The reason I don't use the properties, I don't change any of these properties, is because I'm going to be manipulating the mesh anyway. So by putting it in the exact position with the exact segments at the right scale, that's not an issue for me. I know I'm going to be pushing and pulling points on this cube from the off, so therefore I don't need to spend time setting it up correctly when I know it's just going to get changed. What you can also do, if you don't want to input it in these boxes, is because we have the tool active, you click and drag out, and then you drag out again to give it depth, and there's another cube. Done. Again, you can do that. You could say, yeah, maybe I just want something here and I want it to be this wide or whatever. Yeah, that's fine. Just do it like that. Or, I mean, for me, like I said, Control click, and then I literally just scale it into the position I want. Again, I'm used to that way. It's just the way I use it. With the other primitives, they default to Modo's default, whatever the default is for each of these primitives. Now, for what I'm making, this, I don't really like this so much. So, for example, the default sphere has 24 sides and 12 segments. So if we just get that default in, it's quite high res. Now for game modeling, this might be, you know, fine for what you're doing, but generally I try and, like the first time I use it, I'll just set everything to 12, apply tool, and then every time I want that tool, I'll just click it and apply tool, I'll get it. Same with the cylinder. I think, yeah, the default setting is ridiculously high. 24 size, 12 segments. Again, if you're doing game stuff, then I normally bring these all the way down. So I normally have no segments, or rather one segment, so it's got a top and a bottom. But I bring this right down to, you know, a multiple of 4 and apply that. And again, it's kind of more in its primitive form, in my opinion. Easier to manipulate if there's less geometry in it from the off. Yeah, so just watch out for the default versions. On this shelf below, the only one I really use, or ones I use, are this pen tool. So all you do for this is, when you have it selected, you click and you keep clicking and you create, some sort of n-gon. You can manipulate the points you've already pressed by just highlighting, they turn yellow and you click and drag out. Super handy, and if I want to add more points into this now, I just start adding. Now bear in mind that it will add it from the whatever point is highlighted, so I can add down here or I can go up here and add them up here. Once we drop the mesh, it's fine. You can just move all of these again around in vertex mode, or indeed edge mode, whatever. Be wary though that, for example here, you can see, let me just get that, it's kind of highlighted, I hope you can see it. I've got the main mesh highlighted, but you can see that there's this weird polygon happening where it can't really work out which direction this one is going in. Watch out for that, because that's going to trip you up sooner or later. If you hold down left click on here, you'll get a menu that gives you access to curves. So again, curves work in the same way. You just click and you keep clicking to get you a nice little curve. Again, you just highlight and move these points around to change the curve. And likewise, depending on where you last selected the curve, you can import an additional point. Once we drop the tool again, spacebar, we can select these vertices and move them again to get them into like a better position, that kind of thing. Whoa! You can select edges. There we go. So we can do it that way. And if you select the polygon, it selects the entire thing. So just be wary of that. In fact, that must be a new thing for 10.4 as well, because I just selected the mesh in polygon mode and it's given me access again to edit these points. Didn't know you could do that, so that must be a new thing. Excellent. The last one I use here is text. So you just select it, put it down, and we're going to put John Rules, and we're going to change the scale of this, are we? There we go. And drop it. There we go. And there we have our text. When you select it, you're selecting it all at once as one polygon. You can select things, I think you can. Ah, no, I remember now. Yeah, so by selecting polygon, select it all, and edge selects it all. Now you can turn this so it is a 3D mesh in some regards. You can adjust things like the space and the height by clicking on some of these points. You know, just to give it a slant, you know, a bit of difference. And I think on this one, yeah, just something like that. But if you want to kind of manipulate this more kind of closely, then extrude it. Again, we'll go through this in a minute, but by giving it a bit of thickness, we can now go in and we can select all of these things individually and we can move them and things like that. What you can also do here is, say we don't want it extruded, you just select the front, invert the selection and delete it, and that way we're left with all the vertices still and we can move them to wherever we want. So there's like workarounds. As you get used to things, you get used to it. Underneath all that, we've got our transformation tools, same as in any other program. You've got move, rotate, scale, and these, excuse me, are assigned to W, E, and R. W, E, and R. If you want to snap to if you're rotating, you want to snap to an axis, then you hold Control and then you left click and drag. And as you can see in the tool properties here, we're snapping to every 15 degrees. So that's, you know, a super handy snap thing to remember. Below that, we've got center selected. So I find this is super handy. So if you've got something that's off in space, a bit like this, and we want it to just go back to 0, 0, 0, you just go click on center selected, and then you can choose which axes you want to center it in. All puts it in all axes at 0, 0, 0. If it's off in space like this, we could center it on the X and it jumps to the X, and then we could put it in the Z, puts it in the middle again. I find this is really handy for say we want these selections in at the center, then all we do is select them and put center on the Z, and it moves that selection, so the center of the selection to the axis line, without, you know, affecting the rest of the geometry. And while I did that, I came across something that I forgot to mention. In scale, if we scale this in the Z, you can see we're scaling back and forth. Personally, I hate this setting. If you want to turn it off, you just untick negative scale, and then that locks it to a flat scale position. So now we can now center this on the Z, and we know that it's flat against each other, the vertices in line, and now it's in line with the axes. What you can also do for that kind of thing as well is we could use the action center origin, Alt W, snaps it to the origin, and you can scale it, because the negative scale is turned off, onto the axes. It's whatever's easiest, whatever you're used to. So over to the Deform tab. Again, I don't really use that much in here, but my favourites are shear. So let me get a cylinder for this, a default cylinder. Deform. Let's increase the size of this. Okay, so to shear this, all you do is select it, and you just, if you've got nothing selected, just click inside any of the viewports, and it will, the Falloffs will snap to the furthest points of the mesh. If you want to just shear a selection, then it will snap to the furthest points of that selection. And all you do is you move the transform, and it just shears it, does what it says on the tin. And again, we can just adjust this Falloff to change the where the shear is having an effect. So that's kind of a cool one. It comes in handy, at different points. Another one I like to use more kind of for foliage is twist. So twist is whatever, it basically, again, does what it says on the tin, twists the geometry. You have the same fall off things that you can move around again, and you literally just rotate it and it twists. And you get kind of this, admittedly, this looks very horrible, but you can see the geometry is twisting around like kind of threads in a rope. So that's pretty cool. Twisting as well, depending on the last viewport you click in. So for example, if I'm clicking in the right one here, just navigating and then choose twist, the rotation tool will be in the same axis as the one that you just clicked in. So bear that in mind when you're using the tool. Another one I use in here, bend or Control E. You click where you want the bend to start from. And again, if you want to adjust this, you just hold down the handle and move it to wherever you want, and you just rotate it to bend it. Like with everything else, it's interactive, so we can now move this handle after we've inputted the bend, and we can manipulate which geometry is affected and by how much as well. So bend is another useful one for organic stuff. Yeah, it just bends. And then last but not least for me in here, well actually not last but not least, but push is a good one. So if you want to make a cage, so say we want to make a cage of this mesh, I'll copy, and paste it into a new layer, and then I'll just use the push tool, and again I don't really need anything selected, and you just click and drag and it pushes the geometry out depending on the normal, and as you can see we've got kind of a cage around our model now. So handy for baking. That process is automated now in programs, but before Substance and that kind of thing, and baking in X normal and occasion was really important. So that's push, and then last but not least is need this selected, is taper. Similar kind of thing, it just tapers the mesh depending on where it's placed, like so. So again, another interesting effect, can be quite useful, that kind of thing. Next up, duplicate. Now this is quite a cool one. Radial sweep is quite nice. If I just get another mesh and select one polygon and do a radial sweep, duplicate radial sweep, and this is what we used before. Again, you're interactively changing where this, well, it's originating from one point, but you're changing how thick it is, where it's appearing, how many duplicates it's using, how many segment counts it's using, that kind of thing. Be wary that, as you can see here, all the geometry is flipped, so when we drop this it's still flipped. Just select it, flip it the other way. You could probably get rid of where it entered. You've got yourself a ring sorted. So radial sweep's really nice. Mirror, I find a super handy one. I use it all the time. So we move this off to one side. If we click mirror, and then again we can click anywhere in the program, in the viewport, and it mirrors it. You can choose which axes it mirrors on, and then you can just use the handle to move it off to wherever you want. Mirror has, and a lot of these options have other options in them as well, and this is generally to do with instancing. So if we go instance mirror on this, and then click, we've got an instance of that mesh. Now this is handy, so when we drop it and we can manipulate this mesh again, and the instance is going to pick up the same information. You can also instance an instance. Just be wary when you're doing that, because it might not be obvious what the original instance is, but hopefully you won't be instancing vast quantities of meshes upon each other. The shortcut for mirror is Shift V. Another good one here is curve extrude. So if we get a cube again, we select one face, and then we click on curve extrude, and then we start clicking. It now we're manipulating the curve, but we're using that selected geometry. And again, it works the same with other the cube settings from before, the curve settings from before. If you want to add more points, you select a point and it adds it next in line. So that's pretty handy. Once we drop this, that's in. If we undo this, we'll lose the curve we made. So the other thing you can do is put a curve on another layer. So let's just bung in a curve here. Okay, there's our curve. We go back to our original. Sorry, let me just move this up. Go back to our original and select the face of it. And now if we go duplicate, curve extrude, and then click on the curve, it now uses that curve. I think now so it uses the curve as a base. You can still manipulate it, but you're not affecting the original curve. So be mindful about that. Again, when we drop this, it's gone in. We can't edit the curve that the extrude is along. If we undo it, we lose it. But because we use another curve on a different layer, at least we still retain that original curve. Okie dokie. Clone tool is pretty, standard really. Let's just clone this mesh. I want to clone them in whatever direction. I want 10 of them, and it clones it. So really super user friendly, that kind of thing. Likewise, we can do an instance clone, and this does the same thing but just with instances. So we can move all of these about to wherever we want, and then we can drop the tool and edit the main mesh, and all of them update. Array works exactly the same way as the clone, but instead of having everything just on one axis, you can have them on multiple axes instead. So, for example, here we're moving them out in X and Z, and we can also change the positions and how far away and how many of them are in Y as well. So that's super handy, and of course there's an instance version of that. And then last but not least, radial array works in a similar way to the radial sweep, but instead of using a mesh selection, we're now just using that mesh as an input. And again, we can just adjust this to wherever we see fit. We can angle it. Yeah, all kinds of quite cool and interesting shapes can be made using this. And it's you kind of go, right, oh well, that's kind of what I want the look of. You edit your main mesh and then just bung this in again, and you've got yourself some cool looking shape. Yeah, so that's basically the ones I use in Duplicate. Next on, mesh edit. So this contains a lot of things which just apply to editing meshes. Most useful for me personally, slice, Shift C. You just drag out a slice, and when you drop it, that slice has been made. You can slice as much as you want, it doesn't really matter. What you can also do is you can, if you press X, it turns snapping on. You can get to snapping up here as well. When you toggle it on, the tool properties updates. If you click on that button or you press F11, then you can have the snapping options available to you. Generally for me, I stick to grid or vertex depending on what I'm doing. I don't really have a need to snap to anything else. But if we now slice with snapping on, we drag this out, but you can notice that the handles have turned to these crosses. These will now snap to, the nearest vertice. And then you can just slice that way. And then you just toggle that off with X. So that's slice. If we want to use another one I find really handy is edge slice or just C. And basically you start in a mesh, you click, and then you can just click and drag out. It gives you a percentage to see how far along you are on that edge, and then you just keep clicking over your mesh to extend that cut. What I like about this one is that, like I said, with that percentage, we can see how whereabouts on the kind of the next edge it is. If you want to put this in the center each time, then you could faff with trying to get it right in just by clicking and dragging, or in the tool properties you go down to position, type in 50%, it's in the middle, done. What edge slicing also lets you do is you can slice within a polygon like so, doesn't really matter, and done. And all those vertices have been recorded. Be careful though when when you slice like this and then you leave a point not connected, you're going to run into errors like that. So if we now use tab, to do the preview, it comes up with this and says there's problems in the mesh. What do you want to do? Do you want to select them or do you want to not select them? So I generally go yes to find the problem area. Here's the problem area. All we do is we connect that last one again to the corner, and now when we subdivide it, we've got no issues. It's trying its best to subdivide it to the mesh to the edge that we've sliced, but it's a bit of a weird one, so you probably wouldn't have a mesh so unconnected as this. What Maniac asked earlier was, can I loop slice? Yes, you can. Here it is. Shortcut is Alt-C, and you click to activate it. You can add as many as you want, as many edge loops as you want, so 3 for example, and then you can use this slider to change where these appear across the mesh. So maybe you want 2 really grouped up, lovely, and the other one's in the middle, great. And then it retains that information, so now if we loop slice the mesh again and again, it's now carried that same information all across the mesh. So when we subdivide it, obviously the edges are closer together, you're going to get a sharper edge and that kind of thing. So really that's all I use in Mesh Edit. See, like I said, it's only a few tools over and over. Okay, Vertex tools, so only for me, maybe 3 I use in here. So first off is Bevel. Now the Bevel tool adapts to what you have selected. So if you have vertices selected, it will use the vertice bevel function. If you have edges, it will use the edge only one. If you have a polygon selected and you bevel it, it will use the polygon only one. Yeah, so if you press bevel or you press B, it bevels, and it bevels the vertices. So that was 1 vertex, it splits into 3, and you can add a rounded edge to this as well, and this can be as high and as low as you want, but essentially this is the smoothness of that bevel. So you can see the difference between 1 and 10 is quite a lot. You get more geometry for the more kind of the rounder the level is, or sorry, the higher the round level is, but you also get a smoother bevel for it too. So that's bevel inverts. One that's quite good is merge tools. So say if I have this vertex here, I turn snapping on and I translate it and put it over another vertex. We've now got 2 vertices in the same place on top of each other. Not great. So to merge these, you just select both vertices, click merge tool, and then just click in the viewport, and it merges both of them. There's this, in the tool properties, there's this distance value. So if you change that to be a higher distance, then only vertices from that threshold of 1mm to, let's say, 10mm or whatever thing you specify are going to merge. Any vertices that sit outside of that won't be merged. So that's one to bear in mind if you want to only merge verts on top of each other, but not verts that are next to each other. Alternatively, you can use, if you want to, so that's really good if you're merging multiple verts. If you want to just, move one vert onto another and merge it, you can use drag weld. Pick the tool up, select the vert you want to move, and I've got snapping turned on, so it's going to snap to other vertices. You just move it onto another vertex, let go, it's merged that vertex. So that's a super easy one. Edges, again, kind of edge specific tools only. So personal favourite is extend. So if you've got an open polygon mesh like this, and we don't want to fill it, but we do want to kind of extrude those sides, and we use extend. So for me, I mean, the shortcut is Z, so it's kind of in that left area anyway. We can click in here, or for me, I do Control Pi and press Edge Extend, and then we extend it out. And it's still not filled, but we are able to just extend the sides, extend those edges. Likewise, as before with the beveling, we can press B or select it in the thing, and we can bevel that corner. And again, you can increase the amount of subdivisions in the bevel to give it, you know, a rounder look as opposed to a flatter one. Another good one that I use is bridge. So in this case, we select both sides of what we want to bridge and click bridge, and it bridges. Perfect. What you can also do, doesn't really matter what angle these are at, you just select both again and press bridge. Now when it's curved like this, we can add segments to it to increase, you know, the flow of geometry, making it like a softer bridge between the two selections. I think you can also change these as well. Yes, you can have a linear one but with more subdivisions. I generally leave it on curve just because you have a nicer flow of geometry. So that's all peachy. And then another one of my personal favorites is slide. So you select an edge, press slide, and you literally just slide that edge up and down between the next two edge loops. So that's really handy when you're adjusting, you know, kind of an edge on something that's already defined. So in here, we can slide in here, and it just slides between the previous two edge loops. You know, really handy if we want to just mix up the shape of something a bit more. So Polygon, again, we've got the pen tool, which we showed in basic. You have bevel, which, you know, same as before. If we bevel this bit here, bevel, you pull it out, and then you use the scale to bring in the bevel. Standard, really. Click and drag with it, and then click and drag further, doesn't really matter. Bridge, again, same as before, but this time we're bridging from polygon to polygon. So you select both and you press bridge. You can also left click and drag to increase the segments dynamically, which is quite handy. Bridge also, when you're bridging in this mode, deletes any polygons, so deletes the original polygons that we selected, you know, super handy. A good one in here is triple. So triple, it basically triangulates the mesh. You can also get to it by pressing Shift T. So if you're, just before you're sending something out to be baked in another program, press Shift T to triangulate the mesh. Just gets rid of any unforeseen errors in how a mesh identifies the direction of the normal. When a mesh is like this as well, you can spin the edges, spin these dividing lines, these triangles. You just press V and it spins it. So this is really handy when you've got an n-gon and you Shift T to divide it up, and then you kind of want to get the flow right yourself. So just press V to toggle, select edges, press V, and we can, you know, toggle these as much as we want, really, like so. Really knackered up that edge there, but yeah, makes it super easy to just, you know, do that. Again, V is right in that area as well. Okay, so there's a curve tab. I don't really use this because the curve is in the basic. And fusion tab, this is to do with mesh fusion. Now, I've used it in the past and it's great, but I recommend mop booleans, the thing that Torfrick and is it William Vaughan came up with. It's much simpler and easier to use than fusion. Now, just to kind of finish on a decent note, tab UV is super handy. So you can go to the UV tab layout for this. That's fine, but I don't use that. I just don't. So in order to see your UVs, you need to first, in this properties panel, there's a lists tab. You click on that, and then in here where it says UV maps, you open this drop down box, and generally, well, whenever you create a new mesh, it says it comes with here make UVs, so it will just make some UVs for you. So there'll generally always be a UV map in here. If not, you press new map, type in a name for it, and you've got a new map. To open this up in a new window, you just double click it, and that brings up the UV editor window. And this is why I like having access to the UV window, but still be in the model tab. It just makes things a bit easier. So if we go back to this tab, as you can see, there's a lot of red going on. As we move the left mouse over the thing, lots of things are highlighting in both the editor, the UV editor, and also you can see the blue highlights in the 3D viewport. Now, it's red because it's saying there's a lot of UV information over each other, and that's not great. So that's one. So what's nice about manipulating UVs is that the selection modes that you have in 3D Edit work the same as they do in UV mode. So polygons select polygons, edges, edges, vertices, vertices. What's also of note here is transformation tools work the same as they would do in 3D Edit. Okay, so first off, UV projection tool. This contains your common ones: planar projection, cylindrical, spherical, atlas, cubic, blah blah blah. For me, I generally stick to atlas, bam, because it's the easiest one to separate all your meshes straight off. What's cool is that if you're struggling to get the desired unwrap in using these projection tools, but you can find the right angle that you want it to unwrap from, you can use this thing called project from view. So say these bits here, I want the unwrap to look like this. You select what you want unwrapped, and you press project from view and click, and nothing happens. So that's, oh, you click in the viewport, that's it. You click in the viewport, but you can see that now if we move this to be like this and click in the viewport, it changes to match exactly what we have in the viewport. So I'm just going to get a sphere for this one, a default sphere. Let's move this out to one side. So another thing you can do is if you select edge loops like this, you can see it's given us default UVs, that's fine. But say we want to unwrap the UVs along these edges, you select the edges you want and you press unwrap tool, and then you click, and there it has split all our UVs into the islands that I've specified. So that's a pretty cool one. Relax, UV relax does exactly what it says on the tin. It relaxes the meshes. So you couldn't really see anything there, but if we go back to this one, so you can see that this shape is kind of doesn't reflect this as well as it could. So you press relax, and you kind of just drag it if you want, or click, and it just relaxes it into the position that it's trying to describe. If we've got a pipe, so for example this thing down here, let's take the caps off. Say we want the seam to be on the inside of this, you just select the edge loop you want and you press UV peeler and click, and that peels the mesh down that edge that you selected. So really handy for pipes, that kind of thing. Just remember to either hide or delete the caps otherwise that is going to screw things up a little bit. What you can also do after you've peeled something like this is you can press rectangle and just OK it, and it basically takes your shape, whatever the shape it is, and puts it into a rectangular form. So again, really handy for pipes, and really like something that has, you know, maybe the mesh is like all over the place, but you want the texture to be consistent throughout, then you use rectangle to do that. Another good one is orientate pieces. So for example, if we move everything like this, so everything's at like a wacky angle, we can go orientate pieces, and there's three options: auto, vertical, or horizontal. Let's go with horizontal. Okay, it makes everything horizontal. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. If something is unwrapped and it's flipped the wrong way, then you can use either flip UVs to flip it in place, or mirror UVs to mirror them. So they're, you know, handy ones for that. Personal favourite of mine, pack UVs. You specify how much gap you want between islands, and kind of, do you want to stop it from stretching the UVs or changing your orientation? Tick on, off, whatever you want. Press OK. Thinks a little bit and then packs it into the 0 to 1 space. So for me, when I'm doing a lot of stuff quickly, I will atlas project it, check that all my seams are in the right place. I will relax the UV shells, orientate the UV shells, and then pack them. So in 5 quite simple and quite quick steps, you can unwrap something and not be kind of bogged down in what can be a tedious process of doing 3D modelling. Last but not least, you can move and sew things quite quickly and easily. So what you do is you can be in vert mode or edge mode for this. I quite like edge mode, because it's a bit more easier to see. So for example, if we wanted this UV island to be connected back with this one, we can select, by selecting edges, your selected ones are orange and the other edge of the other island is purple, so you know, it shows you where this mesh is likely to go, or what mesh is likely to come with it. In this move and sew option, you then select selected if you want the unselected piece to move to the selection, unselected if you want the selected piece to go to the unselected section, or average to, you know, meet them in the middle. But super easy, quick and easy. You can also, if you use vertices, you can select the vertices and the adjacent ones of where they're going to go to are highlighted in purple. And then to sew these, you go under the move and sew options, there's this with options, click that, sew, and then again you can change center of selected, center of unselected, or an average between them. Doesn't really matter, they all do the same job. But when you're doing it with vertices, you can see here, because one of these vertices has got has got a version of itself on 3 different islands, it's going to, you know, merge all of them onto the same position. That's why I prefer edges, because you're more in control of what's selected and where it's going to. If you want to separate polygons from a UV island, you just select them, press W. Now when we're in just by pressing W, it's still attached when you move it. To detach it, you just click this tear off button and then it tears it off. And then we can sew that back together by just highlighting again and clicking move and sew. So just while, as a very last note on this end bit, but say I want to assign some materials, all you do is select the mesh in Polygon mode and press M. That brings up this assign polygon set material, and call this, I don't know, red. And then in here you can change the colour to be red and press OK. And now you've got a red material. We then select another mesh and go, maybe I want this one blue. M to select the material. Change the colour so it's a bit obvious. And now we've got two different materials in the scene. To select a material without having to, go into item mode, then select the material you want with, just normal selection types. For example, what if these polygons were blue? Have I got to select them, then invert the selection to get everything else, but then I get all of this? No, too faffy. If you press 4, you can select materials just like this. You can also press this materials button up here, but 4 is the shortcut. And say we've got, this grey material, we select that, but we want the polygons. Simple, you just convert it into polygons and you've got them. So it's quite good to, assign materials as you're going sometimes, just because then it makes selecting them easier when you're still editing the mesh, just because it allows you to convert selections like that. Yeah, so when you've done this, you can, if you go over to the shader tree, or shading, so from the Scene Explorer you've got items to shading, you can see our material sets are here, blue and red. To access the actual material, you have to go open up the drop-down box, the arrow, and select the material here. Now, when that happens, you'll go back to your properties and you'll see our properties are changing. So material ref contains all kind of your default parameters for materials, so color, diffuse amount, roughness, bump, depth, that kind of thing, double-sided, that's all in there. In material trans, it's about transparency, subsurface amounts and luminosity. But really, for the vast majority of all cases, you're just going to be tweaking stuff in just material ref. And then one last note before we go. Say I want to just put an image in here. You go add layer, image map, load image. I'm going to get our bear picture in again. And there he is, he's come in. You can see the images here. Now to make sure that it's using the right texture, in fact I'm going to just put this in the red material so we can see it a bit better. There we go. You want to move down to this texture locator tab, and you want to just check the projection type is UV, and the UV map is the one that you've edited the UVs in. These are drop-down boxes again, so you can, just do them that way. And now if we go into our texture and just scale all of these up, you can now see that the bear is using the UVs as described in the UV map, and we can see him. So that's a very quick, if you want to play about with images and materials over the next couple of days, that's how you go about setting them up. So that is, I know I rushed massively in the end there, but that is the kind of very basics of kind of Modo, what to expect when you first open it, what the different modes are, that kind of thing, selection types, what kind of tools are available to you, and some material and texture stuff at the end there. I hope it was useful, I hope you found it interesting. Let me know in the meantime in Discord, I'll just post up the link now. If you have any problems or any questions, again, look at the help system, it's really useful. But yeah, that's essentially it.